If I were to pick out what is probably the most controversial food of all, that would have to be eggs. Uh, there's a lot of confusion about eggs, especially in the world, but also in the medical world. Eggs have been demonized, and people are very confused about it. So hopefully, I'm going to clear up some of the confusion in this video about why you should eat eggs. Basically, first of all, eggs are loaded with nutrients because, let's face it, eggs are needed to produce a chicken. So you have all the nutrients for growth are all in the egg. It's A large single egg contains, for example, 6% of the recommended daily allowance of vitamin A, 5% for folate, 7% for B5, 9% for B12, 15% for B2, 9% for phosphorus, and 22% of the recommended daily allowance for the trace mineral selenium. Eggs also contain decent amounts of vitamin D. Well, let me comment on that one. There's a couple of blogs I've seen where they're telling people that they can get all the vitamin D you can from eggs. That's nonsensical. Well, egg yolks do contain vitamin D. It's in very, very small amounts, certainly not enough to get you into an optimal level of D as measured by 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. That's the blood test for vitamin D. So, don't listen to those blogs that tell you that you can get all the vitamin D you need from fish and egg yolks. That's nonsense. You'd have to eat a ton of them. You'd be eating so many calories you'd get fat as a house. It's ridiculous. Stupid blogs. But anyway, eggs also do contain natural vitamin E, vitamin K, B6, calcium, and zinc. It's loaded with various nutrients, all in small amounts, not massive amounts. The average egg has 77 calories, 6 grams of protein, and 5 grams of fat. Now, it is true that eggs are high in cholesterol. A single egg contains 212 milligrams of cholesterol, and the average recommended daily intake of cholesterol is 300. But you have to keep in mind that cholesterol in the diet, how much cholesterol in your food doesn't translate into cholesterol in blood. This is one of the big confusions about eggs. Because eggs are high in cholesterol, for years, organizations like the American Heart Association, various self-styled nutrition authorities have warned people not to eat eggs because eggs are high in cholesterol and they could cause, cholesterol is associated with heart attacks and strokes. First of all, most people can only absorb a very small amount of cholesterol from food. I'll get to that in a second. But the second thing is that there's no evidence that the cholesterol in eggs can cause heart attacks and strokes. It's utter nonsense. The liver actually produces large amounts of it. Your liver produces, I believe, if I remember correctly, about a gram of cholesterol a day. It's very important for the development of cellular membranes. Cholesterol forms a raw material for steroid hormones, including testosterone, estrogen, DHEA. All of these steroid hormones are made from the raw material of cholesterol. So cholesterol is an essential component of the body. So that's why your liver produces it. And when you increase your intake of dietary cholesterol from food, it has a feedback mechanism where the liver produces less cholesterol because of the cholesterol you're eating in food. That's the way it works. So the response to eating eggs does vary. 70% of people, eggs don't raise cholesterol at all. 70%, it doesn't raise the cholesterol, but there is 30%, they're called hyperresponders, where the eggs can mildly raise total levels of what they call levels of total cholesterol, and LDL, or low density lipoprotein cholesterol. The LDL cholesterol has been often called the bad cholesterol because it's associated with cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis. But I have to keep in mind also there's a caveat to that too, in the sense that LDL cholesterol, low density lipoprotein, is only atherogenic when it's oxidized. In other words, LDL cholesterol, when it's not oxidized, it's perfectly safe. In fact, the cholesterol carried by LDL is the main cholesterol carrying the blood. The cholesterol carried by LDL also goes to the testes, where that cholesterol, the LDL delivers the cholesterol to the testes. It hands it over to a protein called STAR, and then what happens is it goes through a process where the cholesterol is eventually converted through enzymatic actions into testosterone. So to say that LDL is bad is crazy. I mean, they did a study a couple of years ago where they found that people with larger muscles tend to have higher LDL levels, and you think it's because of this effect with testosterone. So, as I said, HDL, which is another cholesterol carrier in the body, that stands for high density lipoprotein. It's often called the good cholesterol because HDL, the function of HDL is what they call reverse cholesterol transport. It takes excess cholesterol out of the blood, carries it back to the liver, where the cholesterol is converted into bile salts, and in that way the cholesterol is excreted from the body. Because you can't burn cholesterol like you can oxidize fat, you can't oxidize cholesterol. This is the only way of getting rid of excess cholesterol. That is the HDL carrying it, out of the blood back to the liver where it's turned into bile salts. People who have higher levels of LDL usually have lower levels of heart disease, stroke, and other health problems. That is true. By the way, when you take anabolic steroids, you increase the activity of an enzyme in the liver that breaks down HDL. So users, particularly I'm talking the oral steroids, almost all of them do this. They stimulate this enzyme in the liver that degrades HDL. So these guys who take oral steroids, or women, whatever, if they have a blood test, their HDL will show up as almost nothing. The normal levels of HDL begin at 35 milligrams and up. Steroid users typically have HDL levels and blood lab tests of 5 milligrams or less. Now you might say, well, does that mean they're heading for a heart attack? Well, I've seen a lot of these these lab tests of champion bodybuilders. I remember one guy showed me it was a top pro bodybuilder. He showed me his lab test. He had an HDL level of I think it was 5, and he was worried because he had heard that having a low HDL level would cause heart attacks. He was a little concerned about that. But when I looked at his total cholesterol level, it was like 140. Which is very low. If your total cholesterol level is below 150, then the HDL level becomes less relevant. The more relevant factor is your LDL level, and this guy had an LDL level of something like, if I remember correctly, something like 60. In LDL 100 or less is not atherogenic. In other words, LDL only when it goes over 100 does it start to cause atherosclerosis. So even though this bodybuilder had a HDL of 5, he wasn't really at risk for heart disease at all. Now, wait a minute. Let me amend that statement. I should say he wasn't at risk for heart disease due to his blood lipid levels, but steroids in high amounts, oral steroids, can cause other changes in the heart, which do make him susceptible to heart disease, depending on how high the dose is and how long it uses it, but that's a completely different story. Eating eggs is a good way to increase HDL. By the way, eating any kind of fat increases HDL, any kind of fat. And of course, eggs contain fat. In fact, one of the problems with low-fat diets, often recommended low-fat, high-carb diets, which is often recommended to treat, let's say, cardiovascular disease or high cholesterol. The problem with those kind of diets is that they tend to lower HDL because of the lack of fat, while they also tend to raise LDL a little bit. So surprisingly, they're not as heart healthy as you might expect. A lot of it has to do with total calories too, though. But as I said, eggs also increase HDL. One study showed that eating 2 eggs per day for 6 weeks increased HDL level by 10%. You also increase HDL if you're interested. You can increase HDL by exercising, especially aerobic exercise, and also by losing body fat. Every time you lose body fat, your HDL goes up. And also, don't smoke cigarettes, any kind of smoking lowers HDL almost as much as taking steroids. Actually, eggs are also. There's another controversy about eggs I just want to discuss briefly. A couple of years ago, there's a substance called TMAO, trimethyl. Well, I'm not sure what it stands for. I can't remember. Trimethyl something oxide. But basically, some scientists theorized that certain nutrients, such as choline and carnitine, they're converted by intestinal bacteria into this stuff. First TMA and then TMAO, And TMAO, what they found initially was that it appeared to stimulate atherosclerosis, heart disease, strokes, and even diabetes. And of course, eggs were completely condemned because eggs are probably the best nutritional source of choline, a nutrient called choline. And as I said, choline and carnitine can be converted by intestinal bacteria into TMAO. So the thought is these scientists went so far as to say that people should never supplement with choline or carnitine because it would raise TMAO. Now, I've written about this in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. For one thing, the case for TMAO causing atherosclerosis is not conclusive. There are some studies that show that TMA actually may offer protective factors. And also, as I point out in my article in Applied Metabolics, and including an update on TMAO, which I intend to write very soon, there's a whole bunch of nutrients that one of them is garlic, that completely neutralizes the TMAO effect when you eat choline and carnitine. There's another nutrient that a brand new study just came out the other day showing that a substance called pterostilbene, which is found naturally in blueberries, also blocks it blocks the enzyme that's needed to convert TMA into TMAO. So it also neutralizes the effect of TMAO. So if you eat a wide variety of foods or you take these supplements, you can have choline and carnitine. It's not going to cause any problems whatsoever. And furthermore, there's a lot more studies showing carnitine helps prevent cardiovascular disease than cause it. And to make it even worse, the richest natural food source of TMAO is not eggs, it's fish. Fish contains 66 times more TMAO than meat. The studies that found that TMAO causes problems focused on meat. They told people not to eat meat. They went so far as to say it's not the fat in meat that causes heart disease. It was the fact that meat contains carnitine, and carnitine is converted to TMAO. What the scientists who wrote that study failed to disclose was that fish contains 66 times more TMAO. In fact, you can even smell it in fish that have gone bad. You get that kind of really bad fish odor. That's TMAO you're smelling. That's what you're smelling, TMAO. And even fresh fish is loaded with it. And anyone can tell you that, if anything, fish has a beneficial effect on cardiovascular disease. Study after study shows that eating fish, for a number of reasons, because fish contains taurine, amino acid, very good for your heart. It also contains, of course, fatty fish is the richest source of omega-3 fatty acids. Fish is protective against cardiovascular disease. The point being, if TMAO really caused the extent of cardiovascular disease that these scientists claim, eating eggs, eating meat, because of the carnitine choline effect, then eating fish should make you really, really bad. You should be dropping dead from heart disease, and just the opposite happens. So, you got to take some of things in for some of these studies with a grain of salt. And also, remember I was talking about LDL, how LDL, when it's oxidized, it's dangerous. That's low-density lipoprotein. Well, it turns out that eggs, the type of LDL that's most subject to oxidation is what they call small, dense LDL. And there's two versions. There's a small, dense version, and there's a large version, often called fluffy LDL. It's kind of a larger version. It turns out that the small, dense LDL is the one that's most atherogenic because it's most prone to oxidation. The larger LDL form, or the fluffy form, is far less subject to oxidation. And when you eat eggs, you tend to convert the small, dense LDL into the large, fluffy LDL, which, if anything, is very protective against heart disease. So even there, eggs eggs will help you help to prevent cardiovascular. Just the opposite of what you often hear. And also, another thing to think about with eggs, one of the reasons why I strongly suggest eating eggs, is they're the best natural source of nutrients for the eyes. See, some of these nutrients concentrate in the retina of the eye, and I'm talking about lutein and zeaxanthin. Zeaxanthin. No, it's zeaxanthin. I want to make sure I get the pronounce. Zeaxanthin. These are two carotenoids. They tend to concentrate, in the same family as beta carotene from vegetables and all that, and lycopene. These things tend to concentrate in the retina of the eye. And study after study shows that lutein and zeaxanthin help to prevent eye diseases such as macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness in older people. And the thing that's interesting about lutein in eggs is that the lutein in eggs is far more bioavailable than that found in vegetables. In other words, you absorb more lutein when you eat egg yolks than you do from eating vegetables. Studies show that consuming adequate amounts of these eye nutrients can significantly reduce the risk of macular degeneration and cataracts, which is another common aging-associated eye problem. One 1999 study found that eating just 1.3 egg yolks per day for 4.5 weeks increased blood levels of lutein by 28 to 50%, and zeaxanthin by 114 to 142%. And if that's not all, they also found a recent study found that lutein seems to help protect the brain. It not only protects the eyes, but in the brain it acts as a potent antioxidant. It can help prevent the onset of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I'm laughing because, people throw out egg yolks. Egg yolks are the ones that have these nutrients. It's insane. But I'll get to that in a second. But also, that there's different types of eggs sold. If you buy the eggs that are enriched with omega-3 fatty acids, which cost a little bit more, these things can provide a source of omega-3 fatty acids other than fish. And some studies show that eating just 5 omega-3 enriched eggs per week for 3 weeks lowered blood triglyceride levels by 16 to 18%. Triglycerides are blood fat that also is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease because it can also be triglycerides can be turned into LDL and converted in the liver. Now, of course, what's eggs most famous for? The protein content. Eggs are famous for the high content of essential amino acid. Indeed, for years, egg protein was the standard for all the food proteins. Now, all the proteins were measured against eggs. Eggs were considered the perfect protein. An average egg contains 6 grams of protein. But something to remember is that half the eggs in the yolk, half the eggs in the white. Now, when they talk about the high biological value of eggs, they're talking about whole eggs, not egg whites. In other words, egg whites don't contain the full complementary amount of essential amino acids that makes eggs special. To get that, you have to eat the whole eggs, the yolk and the white. So these bodybuilders that continue, I've been talking about this for about 35 years, this nonsensical idea of eating only egg whites and discarding the yolks. Most of the vitamins and nutrients are in the yolks, and to get the full benefit of the essential amino acid content of eggs, you got to eat the whole egg, not the whites. That's not going to do it. In fact, recent studies show that bodybuilders who consume whole eggs rather than just egg whites make more muscle gains. And by the way, that cholesterol that's found in egg yolks, remember, that's a precursor for testosterone. In fact, in studies with older people, they had 2 groups of older people lift weights. One group consumed whole eggs, the other group didn't. The group that consumed whole eggs gained far more muscle size than the group that did the same workout program but didn't eat whole eggs. And they think the scientists speculate that the effect was due to the cholesterol found in the eggs, which acted as a precursor for testosterone synthesis, because, of course, most people know as you get older, your testosterone levels drop. And, if you combine exercise with higher testosterone levels, that equals more muscle mass. And that explains the results of this study. There was a famous bodybuilding trainer who I knew. I trained in his gym, got to know him well, Vince Caranda. He's one of the top bodybuilding trainers of the 60s. He trained the first Mr. Olympia, Larry Scott, Don Howarth, a number of other top bodybuilders of the 60s. He considered fertile eggs he said that fertile eggs offered the similar anabolic effects to using anabolic steroid drugs. And he used to advise eating as many as 20 to 30 eggs a day. And he also was way ahead of his time, because I remember having a discussion with Vince when I asked him about, well, Vince, if you eat 20 eggs a day, isn't that going to cause problems with cholesterol and heart disease? Because at that time, that's what everybody believed. And Vince said, no, it doesn't affect it at all. And it turns out he was right. He was 40 years ahead of the medical science when he said that. Although eating eggs, like I say, eating eggs are often associated with the onset of heart attacks and strokes. But a 2013 review in the British Medical Journal, it looked at 17 prior studies that included 263,938 participants and found zero association between eating eggs and the development of heart attacks or strokes. 238,000 people, no incidence of heart attacks or strokes. A 2011 study found that eating eggs while on a low-carbohydrate diet improved several cardiovascular risk factors, such as improved lipid files, such as elevated HDL, the better form of LDL, and also it didn't affect total cholesterol levels. Eggs are great for those interested in losing body fat because the high protein content of eggs produces a satiety effect. What that means is satiety refers to a feeling of fullness and a lack of hunger, and protein's famous for doing that. That's why most successful diets, like low carbohydrates diets and other diets, always feature a higher protein content because it helps you stay compliant to the diet. Because if your hunger gets out of control, you're not going to be able to stick to any type of diet. So most successful diets feature high protein content. And of course, eggs, because of their high protein content, produce a higher satiety effect, which means less hunger. In fact, the 2005 study of 30 overweight women showed that eating eggs instead of bagels for breakfast increased feelings of fullness and made them automatically eat fewer calories for the next 36 hours. So again, I just want to leave off by pointing out, as I said, I'm sorry to be redundant, but please don't fall into that trap of eating only egg whites. Most of the benefits that I talked about in this video relate to only whole eggs. Egg whites are just about pure protein, which I know some people think is a good thing, but again, you're not getting the full complement of essential amino acids. It's not the protein in egg whites is not as good as most people think. In other words, to get the real benefit, the protein benefits of eggs and the nutrients, you got to include the egg yolk. So don't be stupid and eat only egg whites. I know a lot of you listening to this, it's like follow the leader type of thing. You'll read or somewhere online that Joe Schmalecki, Mr. Indiana or something, likes to have egg whites for breakfast. So you think, well, that's the way to go. Don't do that. The people that do that have no idea what they're doing. It's based on nothing. And some people will say, well, I eat egg whites because of the fat in the egg. Well, most of the fat in eggs is monounsaturated fat. Monounsaturated fat, when you're active, when you're working out, you burn monounsaturated fat like a match. Monounsaturated fat only tends to stimulate body fat in people that are sedentary. So the type of fat that's found in egg yolks tends to be burned up or oxidized by exercise. So not even fat is a factor with egg yolks. There's no reason to discard egg yolks. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you want the best information about nutrition, exercise science, supplements that work and supplements that don't work, hormonal therapy, women's health and fitness, anti-aging research you can use today, fat loss techniques that really work, ergogenic aids. All of these topics and more are discussed in extreme depth. And in fact, I always warn people, if you have a 10-second attention span, I'll tell you, don't even bother subscribing to Applied Metabolics because it's very, very in-depth. It's for people that are intelligent and want to learn things that are not available elsewhere, kind of off-the-road stuff. I don't cover the usual, lift weights, do 10 reps, that stuff that still exists on some online sites. I call it the, Jack and Jill walk up the hill stuff. My stuff is, my material is for intelligent people, but I hasten to add, my newsletter is written in plain English. I've been a writer for well over 40 years. I know how to write. I've written probably, but must be close to 9,000 articles by now over the past well over 40 years. So I know how to write, and I know how to translate any technical term into simple terms you'll understand. Anybody who's passed the sixth grade, or at least reached the sixth grade, in other words, anyone who's able to read, who's literate, will understand completely my Applied Metabolics newsletter. I don't write in extreme science technical terms like some of these digital publications I've seen, which read like medical journals. It's like wading through thick mud. I'm into science. I've studied it for half a century. I can't even get through those articles. They're so damn boring, and they just don't know how to write. These people are not writers. but I am. So, I think that I also include anecdotes about my days training with some of the great bodybuilders of the 70s, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and others. I try and keep it entertaining as well as informative. You could subscribe today at www.appliedmetabolics.com. It's 40 to 50 pages every month. There's no ads. I'm not trying to push any products. I'm not associated with any supplement companies. I'm not getting kickbacks from anybody. All I'm trying to do is provide you with 100% truthful information, because all my life I've been a seeker of truth, and I want to give that to you. I want to give you a source of information that you can count on. It's evidence-based. It includes current science and my own empirical experience of over 58 years of being in the gym, learning what works and what doesn't work. So again, subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Facebook Applied Metabolics page, where each day I post new information on medicine, health, fitness, and nutrition every day. I post interesting stuff about that. I also answer questions from subscribers, because remember, the Applied Metabolics Facebook page is closed page. It's only for subscribers, current subscribers. I also have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics page, again, strictly for current subscribers. I don't answer questions from unsolicited questions from non-subscribers. You're welcome to leave comments under these videos. Hopefully you'll leave nice comments. Sometimes I'll answer them if I have some time. Most of the time I just don't have the time to answer the comments under the videos, but I will occasionally, and you're welcome to leave suggestions for topics for me to discuss in future videos. Feel free to do that. I have done quite a few videos based on suggestions left to me in the contents. I try to make this interactive. I want to talk about things that you people want to hear about, so that's about it. If you want to have where's Bruno? Bruno's around here. Bruno loves eggs, by the way. Bruno's very a finicky dog, but he loves eggs. So that tells you something, Anyway, if you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. They're the best. Take care.